Production of A Good Read on Maine PBS is made possible in part by the Verizon Foundation, supporting literacy programs and partnerships reaching adults and children across America on the web at verizonreads.net.
I just walk briskly down to the dock, look out across the ocean, look up at the sky, look to the sunrise, then I walk back, and then I will get to work. And usually I've done a good part of my work before anyone arrives in the day.
Here is a hell, I'm quite ashore, for pray, if there were not, where would my neighbors go?
Hi, I'm Sandy Phippen, your host for A Good Read. Ashley Bryan's fascination with books started at a very young age. In kindergarten, he was self-publishing books that he wrote, illustrated, bound, and distributed himself. It's little wonder that in later years he became a Fulbright scholar and taught at Dartmouth College. Now he's a children's author, illustrator, and painter with a flair for making poetry entertaining. Ashley may have grown up in New York City, but an island off the Maine coast is home.
Often on weekends, we'd come to the coast, to Acadia National Park, and it was from looking out from those mountains to these islands. When I saw those islands, I said to the Maine students, "That's home! Find a place for me on one of those islands."
Is that because of your ancestry being from Antigua, the West Indies?
It may very well be, and it's also my love of being surrounded by the water and having those essential elements always in view, reminding one of what is life really, you know, the earth, the sea, the sky.
And here on the islands, I've been on some of the islands, and at night you can see the stars so clearly.
Yes, well, that's something that you're aware of, because in New York City, you can forget that there is a sky. You can go through days without remembering to look up. Here, I hardly ever go to bed without seeing how the sky is doing, whether it's foggy or the stars or but you just want to check all of those elements out, and it's wonderful.
But you didn't live here year-round till rather recently, till you get rid of Dartmouth, when you finished with Dartmouth College,
Yes.
teaching there?
Yes, well, what I did, I spent summers and sometimes late into the fall, and I also took sabbaticals on this island, so that when I was making the decision about living here, I knew what a year-round living was. I didn't have any of those summer romantic ideas of what a wonderful thing it is, lobster fishing, you know, a wonderful thing to be in this island. So I knew what it was like. And because I'm open to weather, I will go out and walk whatever the weather. As long as I can be comfortable indoors, I flourish. I just love that. I'll go out and walk in the rain, the snow, the heat.
So you've really been a Maine person for 50 years.
Yes.
You might say.
Yes, it's over 50 years, from 46 on, that I've summered or sabbatical, and now since 1988 I've lived year-round on the island.
I want to go back now, though, to the beginning. So I mentioned Antigua. Your parents were born in Antigua.
Yes.
And they moved the family to New York.
Yes, my parents were born in Antigua in the West Indies, and after the First World War, when immigration was still open for the black peoples of the world, there was a tremendous emigration to the United States, and my parents were in that emigration, and they came to New York City, and that's where they settled, and the 6 children were all born and raised in New York City.
In the Bronx?
In the Bronx. Born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx, and lived in the Bronx.
Can you describe that, growing up in the Bronx?
Well, it was a wonderful time because I grew up during the Depression years, and that was when the government created the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, and they gave jobs to writers and to musicians, to artists, to teach people in the community. It was such a wonderful thing, and my parents said, learn to entertain yourself. So they sent us out to whatever was free, because although they could clothe, feed, and house us, they couldn't do the extras.
I read where you loved your mother's apartment, the way she made it cozy and creative.
Yes, that was one thing that meant a lot to me. My mother loved plants, so wherever there was light, there were plants. And if there was no light, she made crepe paper flowers. And we as children, we would wind the green things around the stem, the green ribbons. And so it was a colorful home, and my friends loved to come in there. And that's why when the children ask me, were my parents artists, I always say yes, because it takes a feeling for your environment to create something like that. It's that aesthetic that's in everyone.
You called your mother the songbird because she was always singing?
Yeah, my mother sang from one end of the day to the other. My dad used to say, your mom must think she's a bird, because she was always singing. But my dad loved birds, and he had cages in the living room. At one point, I counted up to 100 birds, canaries and finches and parakeets and all of these birds. He was always bringing home a bird. Depression years, but he loved birds. My ma used to say, because on Sundays he was occupied with this, he'd say, I'd have to get into a cage if I want to get any attention around here.
And your father, too, was a musician, wasn't
Yes,
he?
he had a natural feel for instruments, so he played piano, the guitar, the saxophone, whatever he could pick up. And on Sundays, quite often, his cronies from Antigua, who were all called aunt and uncle, all my parents' friends were aunts and uncles to us as kids growing, and they would just play music and sing and drink their beer and all their hymns and songs and everything.
And
it was always going on.
This wonderful house of yours filled with everything, that you were a collector like your father.
Yes, well, in that way, I love to bring around me things that I responded to. I like to celebrate the craftsmanship of others. I was always involved in emulating that, of making my own things with my sisters and brothers, making my puppets, doing things with patches of cloth, because we lived near the commercial streets where they'd put out all of these interior decorating materials, and my sister and I would make patterns, and she'd sew them together and make vests and skirts and patchwork quilts from them. So we were always creating, and so I love that spirit in others. When I see something that someone has created that's beautiful and I can afford it, I buy it.
It sure shows. Incredible environment here. Walking in here is like a part museum, part gift shop, I guess. Yeah. Whatever, but fascinating.
Well, I like you to feel something of cheer and spirit when you walk into it. You see, because we come through so much that we have to contend with in the world, with the news and with other things in our jobs and things out there. I like to open the door and walk into a room where I can smile. And this environment has made that possible for me. Little children also are another way, but...
Yet you compared toys to children. You said they always make you smile.
Yes. I've loved working with children. You know, at times I would leave the college level and work with kindergarten, first graders in drawing and painting, because I love their absorption in what they do. Because on an adult level, that's what I would like to achieve. I would like to be working in such an absorbed way that there is no time. What do you mean an hour is up and you have to go to another place? No, that's that spirit of absorption in work that I watch in children and would love to see. The Dancing Granny, an African folktale collected on the island of Antigua in the West Indies. Sure enough, Spider Nancy soon came round again to plunder Granny's vegetable patch. Yum, he thought as he looked out over the pretty field. If the corn tasted so good, I wonder how Granny's peas and beans might be. Spider Anansi climbed up into the tree, and he began to sing. Ah, Minilla Lily. Again, I'm in the country, 'cause Nana's corn tastes good to me. I see those beans, I see those greens, I see those beets fit for kings and queens.
You graduated from high school in New York.
Yes, from the Theodore Roosevelt High School in New York and Fordham Road in the Bronx.
And then you got into Cooper Union first.
Cooper Union. I was accepted at Cooper Union because when I graduated high school in January, I did not make it right in because my portfolio, although it was considered the best, it would have been a waste to give it to a colored person, I was told. My teachers at high school, who were all white teachers, had encouraged me all along, and they were surprised to hear this. They said, Ashley, you come back and do a postgraduate course. You can work on the senior yearbook. In the summer, take the exam for the Cooper Union. They don't see you there. And so the exam was first a college entrance exam and an elimination exam. If you got past that, you brought a bar of plasticine clay, and you did an exercise in sculpture, in architecture, and drawing. And on the merit of that, they selected the 50 for the day school, 50 for the night school at that time.
And race didn't count.
Well, they couldn't see you.
Oh, yes,
you just
right.
handed in your work. They didn't know. I was the only black in my class, but you see, I could not have gone on without a scholarship, because with 6 children, and there were also 3 cousins my parents raised when my aunt died, and they were raised as brother and sister with us. So there was no way we could go on without scholarship
Was the course at Cooper Union 2 years or 4 years?
It was at that time a 3-year
3 years.
program, ending with a diploma, later made the equivalent of a degree. But at the time I was taking it, I was interrupted in the 3rd year by the Second World War and drafted into a segregated army in the Second World War.
What was it like, Ashley, among the black guys, American black guys, to be segregated from the rest of the Army?
Well, you immediately knew that it was very hard to maintain that spirit of what you were fighting for, because you're always being used badly. You were not giving the privileges of other soldiers, the white soldiers. Although we were in the invasion group and were to be retired after a month to a rest area, that never happened with the black soldiers. We continued to work in that area until the beach closed down, you see. And so you always had that. And generally, you had white officers who were not sympathetic to black people, you know. And so you always had that to contend with while you maintained yourself, you know. And so I was always drawing. And that was the way I kept myself together. And they were always telling me to stop drawing, but I said, I'll never stop drawing. I had my drawing materials all in my backpack, in the gas mask. And whenever there was not a time to work, I would have out my sketch pad and I would be drawing. The fellows who had been drafted into the Army or in the Army said, after they saw this, they said, Ashley, where did you get the time to do drawing and painting in the Army? And I looked at them quite innocently and said, wasn't I supposed to keep growing as an artist? They said, Ashley, you were a GI. That meant government issue. You had no rights. But I was only fighting for what I thought were my rights. I didn't know I had none.
So when you came back to New York, you went to Columbia and majored in philosophy.
Yes.
Because of the war?
I had been so spun around. I had so many things in mind. I said, it was such a devastating experience to see the deaths, the destruction, to see cities almost wiped out. Le Havre, just rubble. People so hungry and starving, coming around the camps to get the food we tossed in garbage pans. Following us to the dumps in our trucks, running after our trunks before we could throw out the garbage, jumping on the trucks to get the... It was such a terrible impression in terms of what you had to live with that I said, why is it that with what we know of war, that man continually chooses war? And even though it doesn't resolve ultimately what life is about. And so I thought, oh, I'll study philosophy and I'll get answers. Well, once I started, all my friends who were the artists said, you're crazy. You're an artist. You can't, you lose all this time because you have to be reading and writing through the whole school year, which I did. I was intrigued by the way man thinks. I was intrigued by the systems of philosophy, of how they construct systems of ethics, of politics, of morality, and of aesthetics, and whether it's applicable or not. But just the excitement of how the brain works to try and make things cohesive. There are always so many flaws, but they're not seeing it. They're just doing it, you see. And so that kept me. And I stayed year after year. And when I finished, I got on a boat and I left for using my GI Bill so I could spend the whole day painting. And I said, that was it. I will be painting from now on. And I have been.
What about the Fulbright scholarship? You received that at Columbia? Was that you at Columbia?
It was after Columbia.
After Columbia.
The Fulbright came. I'd come home after my using up my GI Bill abroad, and I was home and I did my 2 8-hour days for a while, and then I applied so that I could spend the whole day drawing and painting, still trying to get a grip on what it meant to me. And so then I spent the time. I had the Fulbright for 2 years in Freiburg and Breisgau in southern Germany. And I was able to spend the day just drawing, painting. And then when I came home, I entered a 2 8-hour day from then on, teaching to put the bread on the table, and then pushing into my work in drawing and painting, and then doing my little books for family and friends.
Oh, tell about that, the 2 8-hour days. One of your teachers told you that, right?
Yes, that was explained to us at the Cooper Union by a professor that I had, and it was not to scare us. It was simply to explain in the fine arts that that was what was involved. There were areas of the art, was explained, where you make a good living. If you're in film work, in theater, in fashion, in graphic advertising work, you can earn a good living. But in the fine arts, if you're drawing, painting, doing choreography, you're composing music, you're writing poetry, it says prepare yourself for 2 8-hour days, one to earn your bread, the other to keep growing as an artist. And he said there are a handful of artists that can earn their living from the fine arts alone. If you feel you're one of them, fine. But if it doesn't work out, no frustration, no anger. That is the score. That's the way it is.
Now, we've got to go back and tell everybody how you started. You were making little libraries of your own. You were making little books
Yes.
that you illustrated.
Yes.
And were they written into? Did you write in them?
Yes. Well, you see, it started in kindergarten when the children asked me in the first, second grade when I published my first book. I always look at them and say, when did you publish your first book? Because in kindergarten in New York City, in the Bronx, in PS2 that I attended, as we learned the alphabet, we drew a picture for each letter. And when we reached Z, the teacher gave us construction paper, colored paper, and we sewed the pages together. And the teacher said, you have just published an alphabet book. You're the author, the illustrator, the binder, the distributor, so now take it home. So that was how it began. And I got so much praise for that, as we learned numbers, we did, and the numbers, pictures, a number book. We did words, it was a word book. And so it kept growing like that. And because they were so enthusiastically received by family and friends who saw them, that I started making little books as gifts. And that followed through the years. I was always making books for family and friends. And that kept up until the time that Gene Carl at Athenaeum Publishers heard about me in the Bronx. I had not been able to get into the field for over 15 years. When Gene Carl heard about this man in the Bronx, always doing his books for family and friends, she came to my studio, and when she saw all the work I had been doing, she simply sent me a contract to begin work with Athenaeum. And that's how my work has reached a wide audience. But I would still be quite happy and content doing them for family and friends.
You've written like 34 books. I mean, you've worked on 34
Yes,
books, something like that at this
written
point.
and illustrated.
And one of them was the ABC, what is it called? ABC book of
African American poetry.
Yes, that's what it
That
is.
is, yes.
Yes.
That was important for me to do. Black artists are writing in the English language. They have written beautiful work, but they're not a part of our studies. And wherever I go, in reading from them, people will include them in their coursework, whether it's in elementary school, junior high, high school, or university. And so in doing that ABC, I wanted to present 25 poets with one spiritual, because everything I feel is based on the spirituals, you know. So I introduced 25 poets. I just take a few lines of the poem so I can have do the illustration. And then in the back of the book is a bibliography. A number of those few lines is the complete poems, but some of them are excerpts, and the bibliography will send you to a source. And then, of course, if any of the lines appeal to you in a way that you would like to know more of that artist, then you could look it up through that source. So when I started to do this, you know, I had, without leaving my room, over 70 poets that I wanted to present. I didn't have to go and do more research and find the more recent ones and people that, because there are hundreds. But I said, well, I can only do 25, and I began doing little sketches. There were a few that I knew I wanted to have in the book. Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, Nicky Giovanni, Count Cullen. I knew I wanted to have a certain group of them, but then there were others who came into the book through the illustrations I was doing to keep a varied ensemble of pictures throughout the book. But I could go right on to another one and another one in that format. From Ashley Bryan's ABC of African American Poetry, a poem for the letter T by Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
There is a heaven forever, day by day, the upward longing of my soul doth tell me so. There is a hell, I'm quite assured, for pray, if there were not, where would my neighbors go?
I wanted to give a feeling of the air so that when you read, you could hear a storyteller. So I was using the devices of poetry, the rhythm, the rhyme, onomatopoeia, the alliteration, all of those. I just make them dense in the writing, the way prose writers would have a different feeling of the rhythms of their lines. They would not want that to happen. But I want it to happen to slow the reader down, to feel the storyteller is right with him or her, and that they can hear the story.
They should be read aloud, all your stories and poems.
They're for the voice.
That's
They're
right.
for the voice. Even though I hold a book, so that the children I meet with in elementary school will know whatever my voice does, it comes from the printed word.
Right.
Because so often the elementary school kids have dissociated the
Right.
sound of the voice with the printed word. And they will often just read words, and when you ask them, what have you read?
They
They
don't
look
know.
up, they can't
Yeah,
tell you.
so
They
that's-
pronounce the words, but they haven't listened, they haven't heard,
Right.
they haven't gotten the meaning. These words here, it says, gather out of stardust, earth dust, cloud dust, storm dust, and splinters of hail, one handful of dream dust, not for sale. Those are words. It does not become a poem until I become a partner with that poet. The stardust, earth dust, cloud dust, storm dust, stand up, splinters of hail, one handful of dream dust, not for sale.
How long does it take you, Ashley?
I generally work a year on whatever I'm doing for the pictures and the text. If it's someone else's text, I sometimes have been able to do 2 things in the year. But generally I take a lot of time because I paint during the day and I work on my book projects in the evenings, or if it's a rainy day or so, then I can give more time to that project of the book that I'm working on. But it's in that kind of balance that I'm working with. I'm always up early. On the island, I'm very rested, and I don't need the basic requirement of 8 hours sleep. When I'm here, 5 hours is good. I can work till midnight and be up by 5. And I generally will read a while, and then I go for a walk where I am not just stopping and looking at every branch and twig and blade of grass and thinking of things and making little notes and stuff. I just walk briskly down to the dock, look out across the ocean, look up at the sky, look to the sunrise. Then I walk back, and then I will get to work. And usually I've done a good part of my work before anyone arrives in the day.
So the rest of the day?
And the rest of the day, if there are no visitors, I will continue painting outdoors from the landscape, and then evenings working on the books. And that goes on in that way. And I accomplish everything that I'm to do when I'm here. And so I regard everything as a part of what I do. There are people who will let you know that they cannot be interrupted. Well, I don't work like that, and they know it, so people are always free and welcome. Mm-hmm. But I can't ask that of others who can't do that. You have to respect their hours of work. But my work it's seamless. Everything is my work.
And it's continuously interrupted.
But I don't call them interruptions. You see, it's important how your mind thinks about things, how it affects you. If I don't think of them as interruptions, then I know that I'm using it, and when I get to my work, it feeds into it. But if they were interruptions, I might be pulled back when I finally get to my work, thinking I was interrupted. So I've trained my mind as a way of thinking. It's really a matter of how you think. It was the way I say, when you choose to do something, it makes all the difference. I mean, you can want to be a good swimmer, but you'll have to get up in college at 6 o'clock to swim before school begins at 8:30 or 9. Other people are sleeping till 8 o'clock, but you have to get up at 6. Your coach knocks on the door. Time to get up for your swim. And every day the coach knocks on the door. Well, one day you get up, the coach comes and you're up and you're ready. You've taken it on yourself. It's no longer a burden. You're not groaning because you've chosen to do this. When you've made the choice, it's not a burden, it's not a sacrifice. It's an even exchange. And it was important to me because I was involved in raising my younger sister's children. If I saw that as sacrifice, I could not have done it. I saw it as an exchange of what I could do from what they could do.
And a way to learn.
And that made it possible.
Right.
That made it possible because I was drawing and painting from them through all the years.
Well, thank you for letting us knock at your door, Ashley. This has been wonderful.
Well, come again. You're always welcome. It was great being with you, Sandy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've told one tale. Here's another. Call your sister. Call your brother. The frog and hen once met. They walked along together. Hen flapped her wings and spun around. Frog slapped his legs and tapped the ground. Oh, in together now, clucked hen. How'd you like the weather now? Croaked frog. Oh, click clack, clucked hen. See that dark cloud? It's a sign. I know it. A storm's coming. Strut. 2 steps, a peck at a bug. It's still a far way off. Good, said hen. Then there's time. Frog, help me make a hut before the storm hits. A hut? "No me," said Frog. "Here's a neat hole. I'm gonna get into that. I won't help you make art." "Suit yourself," said Hen. "If you won't help me, then I'll make the hut myself."
Production of A Good Read on Maine PBS is made possible in part by the Verizon Foundation, supporting literacy programs and partnerships reaching adults and children across America on the web at verizonreads.net.
Over the 50 years of walking these shores, I have cartons of glass. There's an abundance of the white, the green, the browns. There are touches of red, some I found, but the friends of the island would save their bowls and vases and glasses, things that broke of those colors, so that I could add them in. But the panels are carried by the sea glass, and I love that, bringing back to life things that are rejected.